So many people. I say, I have the gift of discernment. Well, you're cutting it short. It's discernment of spirits, by the way. I've heard so many people say I have the gift of discernment, really meaning discernment of spirits. But they follow so much garbage, and you can't discern when it's not of God. How do you have the discernment? Says you have the word means to be able to judge, to be able to scrutinize, they don't even know what it means, to be able to examine whether it's good or bad. It says those in Berea were more nobler than those in Thessalonica, in that they search the scriptures daily to see that if those things were so. That word search and discern is synonymous, which means they scrutinized it, they examined it. They looked into it to see if it was so. What word was it? They didn't have the New Testament. They looked in the Old Testament to see if the things that were being taught to them really pointed to Christ. And so if you have the gift, not only are you able to discern whether a spirit is good or bad, but you're able to discern whether or not what you hear lines up with the word of God or not. So if you say that and you don't do that, you're condemning yourself, because you're saying, I know, but I refuse to adhere. I just choose to believe most say it and don't have a clue. The last verse. Is this all right tonight? Where the Grace and Truth Ministries will be victorious. And there ain't no way that I refuse to teach you truth. I don't care what anybody says. You're going to have truth. It's not enough to just hear it. Remember, it's not what you see, but it's not just enough to hear it. The word says be doers, be performers, and not hear it. You're hearing it so you'll know what to perform. You're hearing it so that you know how to respond to what. And we have to stop looking to worldly people to tell us how we ought to think. A lot of people have their favorite news station. I'm going to say it. If you want to cut me off the air, so be it. I still keep preaching. If I have to, we just go back to going to different churches or going on the streets, whatever the case may be. Thank God for sermon.net. But you're listening to people who've already made a decision which way they're going to go. You're listening to people who already made a decision on what they're going to believe and how they're going to think. And if it's something that's going to inform you so that you can see things differently, they are only going to give you what they want you to have, and they're going to block. They're not going to announce what they don't want you to know. How do I know this? I have talked to preachers about things, and they said they never heard it before. But you can go right to something else, and it's out there. I had one preacher tell me, and I'll go ahead and say it, I'm not saying anything against you all. I use you too. I like using you. Got some good stuff, some good stuff. But one preacher said to me, if you want to know anything, you go to Google. You find anything you want to know on Google. I'm like, oh my goodness. I'm not saying Google can show you how to get from point A to point B. But they can't tell you everything you need to know. The man had the one station had the guy on their station when we just recently had the hurricane, and it's just so sad. You pump this guy up, how he's a scientist, he's scientific, this and all that, in doing this with the hurricanes. He's this, he's that. Bump him up, just all of his credentials. And then you ask the guy the question. I'm paraphrasing, so I didn't say that. Then you ask the guy the question, what did climate change have to do with the hurricane? The man that you just pumped up as this expert scientist type guy on hurricanes and all, he said, I wouldn't say that climate change has anything to do with the hurricanes. The host, pseudo-journalist, didn't like what the man said, so he goes something like this. Well, I grew up in the South. I grew up down there, and all I know is they've changed. They're different than they used to be. I grew up. So, oh, wait a minute, but you just built him up. But when he didn't say what you wanted him to say, now you know more than he knows, and yet he's the one who's trained, and he's an expert in that area. See, there are people who already have the line that they want to hear. And they want to give you the line, the same line, so that you can hear it. Because they know it's what you hear. Somebody, while you're in here, and you could tell them after, so you could do it. Somebody, while you're in here, look up the hurricane in Galveston, Texas, in the early part of the 20th century, and see what comes up. Somebody, while you're in here on your phone, just look up the hurricane in Galveston, Texas, Galvaston, Galvaston, in the early 20th century. Okay? While you're doing that, I'm going to the last verse, 1 Corinthians 10:22. Do we provoke the Lord to jealousy? Are we stronger than he? Now, why is this question being asked? There are some things that are said before this. And what it's speaking of is the things that people ought not be doing. Verse 19, what say I then? That the idol is anything, or that which is offered in sacrifice to idols is anything? But I say that the things which the Gentiles sacrifice, they sacrifice to demons and not to God. And I would not that you should have fellowship with demons. So I don't want you associated with demons. You cannot drink the cup of the Lord. And that's where I wanted to go. You cannot drink the cup of the Lord. Paterion. And cup here figuratively or metaphorically speaks of the experiences that you have. The divine appointment that you have. And so it's saying here that you cannot partake in the divine appointment of the Lord and at the same time partake in the purposes of demons. You cannot be partakers of the Lord's table and the table of demons. You cannot be partakers in the Lord's table and the table of deacons. Here, table is speaking of that which was said in the temple. And so he's saying you can't be a part of the Lord's temple, but you're worshiping demons. You can't be a part of that. So that's the question. Do we provoke the Lord to jealousy? Are we stronger than he? Do we provoke him to jealousy, or are we stronger than he? And so tonight what I wanted to do was bring out the things that bring about divine jealousy. And we have to take account of what we line up with, and we cannot be stiff-necked and obstinate. We cannot be haughty and think that we could just do what we want and God understands. Because here's the thing. Yeah, you're here now, and you can try to think like that, but when you leave here, everything that you were supposed to do will now be calculated as to whether you did it and how you did it. And so we have to decide what it's going to be, whether you lined up with the Lord or not.